All right. Hey, everyone. And welcome. I'm Scott Cohen from AGP Ventures in Boston, along with David Yahid, based in Renana. Welcome to the latest edition of AGP Access, which is our series aimed at connecting Israeli entrepreneurs to the U.S. market. A special thanks to our co-hosts, EcoMotion, the Israeli mobility tech community, and Arkin Holdings, whose Arkin Sustainability Fund is pioneering the next wave of the Industrial Revolution. By way of introduction, if you don't know AGP Ventures, we're an early stage venture capital firm that invests exclusively in Israeli startups. We're based in Boston and Tel Aviv. And our mission is really to connect Israeli founders to the US market, both through our venture investing, obviously, and through our commercial go-to-market division, AGP Access. So one of the many ways we try to help Israeli founders is through interactive forums like this, where you can meet and interact with decision makers at the Fortune 1000. We've hosted live streams with executives from companies like Apple and Amazon and Facebook and Uber and the NFL, and we're honored to have with us Chris Varley, who's a principal with Goodyear Ventures, which is, of course, the corporate venture capital arm of the $20 billion Goodyear tire and rubber company. Chris has an amazing background, an amazing guy. He's led new business and new product creation efforts at companies like AT&T and Pearson and the Walt Disney Company, and we're thrilled to have him with us today. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, first of all, folks, we run a really informal shop here. So David and I will kick off some questions to Chris, but our goal is to get your questions answered. So pop them in the chat or text us if you're part of our WhatsApp founders group, and we'll do our best to get your questions posed. So Chris, let's start with your backstory a little bit. You were there at the birth of the internet at CompuServe. Like you, I've got a lot of gray hair, so I remember CompuServe really well. Tell us about kind of the personal journey and how you went from the pioneering CompuServe in the late 90s to a global Fortune 500 manufacturing company.
Well, yeah, it was a fairly seamless transition. I had started out in publishing. I was worked my way up to senior editor in artificial intelligence and cognitive science for Addison Wesley in Boston. And then, as I've told you before, I had one of those not my beautiful house moments, wound up chucking everything, going out to Hollywood and being a writer and producer out there until my child was born. And along the way, stumbled across CompuServe because some of the industrial clients I had used it to communicate, and just fell in love. And I wound up weaseling my way into some part of CompuServe. And I remember saying to the guy, I'm going to be out there for the holidays. Maybe I can get you a cup of coffee. And I could hear in his voice, who is this weirdo from Hollywood and why does he want to talk to me? But he wound up hiring me. I worked there for 3 years and then was recruited away by AT&T to run their WorldNet service and did a couple of other services there as well. And that evolved into a venture investment group. And that's where I really felt like, now it's all coming together, because working as a producer in Hollywood really isn't that much different than working as a venture capitalist. You have, on the one hand, you have a script and you have a team, and you want to make sure that everything happens on time and under budget, and that it makes more money than you put into it. The only difference is, instead of a script, it's a business plan or a pitch. Not that different, and in many ways much more exciting, because frankly a lot of the people that I deal with in technology as opposed to entertainment are just incredibly bright, really sharp, fascinating people to be around, and I just love it. I love it to death.
And how'd you make it to Goodyear? What was the connection there?
So I wound up after I left AT&T, I did some economic development work in the Cleveland area, and then was also doing some consulting. And Goodyear hired me initially as a consultant to help sort of not really relaunch, but reorient a external science and open innovation group that they had. And after 2 or 3 engagements with them, they asked me if I would come on board. I think, frankly, that the guy who became my boss was just tired of paying my consulting fees. And it was fascinating to me because people have in their minds certain things about tires. When I looked at a tire after spending some time working with Goodyear, what I saw was a piece of the car that was the closest analog to skin on the vehicle. It's the only part of the vehicle that has meaningful contact with the environment, i.e. the road. And it was a piece of skin that had no nervous system in it, but it's throwing off reams and reams and reams of data with every revolution. And wow, what if you could capture some of that and use it? And now, especially as we're moving into electric vehicles and connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, that feel of the road and that data that the tire is collecting and can transmit is all the more important to these technologies.
And so, like, what's the origin story of the venture group? Is this was this a pre-COVID thing, a post-COVID? Like, what's the,
smack dab at the beginning. So the fund, obviously the planning for it had begun before COVID, but the fund was launched the week the world shut down because of COVID. So it's just about 4 years next week. And at first, you would think, well, that's not an auspicious time to start a fund, but it turned out nobody could go anywhere. We couldn't go anywhere. None of the other companies could go anywhere. And amazingly, it made it easier to do international deals because you didn't have the jet lag. You didn't have to spend 4 days of travel for a 1 hour meeting. So it was great. We are very happy that we're back in a position where now we can do it in a hybrid way so that we can still have initial meetings via video and get to know somebody. But we still very much like to kick the tires and go and meet people and understand who it is that we're going to be investing in face to face, not just over video.
Got it. And tell us about your kind of investment hypotheses. I know you have a great acronym for kind of some of your areas of interest, and then those are evolving. So, like, what's the focus of the fund?
Yeah, so the genesis of the fund was to go beyond just open innovation, which is really project oriented. So it's shorter term. It's either stuff people need this quarter, it's stuff they need next year. And think broader, think 5-10 years from now. What are the major trends that are impacting our business that we need to pay attention to? And how can we make investments in companies that are in those spaces so that we can learn what we need to learn better, faster, cheaper than if we tried to do it all in-house and on our own? Because these are new areas, new skills, different things going on. And so it is very much a learning agenda. We are, like the Fed, we have a dual mandate. We make investments to make money. But the gating factor for us is, what are we going to learn? Is it something we need to know? How are we going to get to know it? So the trends that we see impacting the business, or the acronym we use, is FACES. So fleets, autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, electric vehicles, and sustainable vehicles, sustainability in the entire ecosystem of mobility. So those are the major trends, the major forces that are impacting us as a company. And we need to find ways to respond to them and grow as a company so that we are able to meet the mobility needs of consumers today.
And is the sustainability and new materials piece, is that kind of, when you think about kind of the emphasis of the fund, is sustainability and these new materials something that's increasing? Is it, are there other parts of the kind of the FACES acronym that are taking more of a priority? Like, how are you thinking about, like, kind of prioritization?
Yeah, so if you go to goodyearventures.com and you look at our portfolio, I think we're public on about 17, 18 of the companies that we've invested in. Most of those companies are in the EV or AV space, because initially out of the gate, that's where we really needed to catch up and learn things quickly. How are EVs going to impact our product? What new services do they offer? AV technologies. Our thesis is that so long as autonomous systems are vision-based, and I include LiDAR and radar as just different spectra of vision, they're never going to be as successful as they need to be. Yeah, we all drive with our eyes, but we also drive with the feel of the road. How is my car adhering to this surface? Am I going too fast around this corner? And that tactile aspect of driving is best captured and transmitted from the tire. So that thesis has driven our investments in AV. Gatik would be the poster child for that. Gatik is an autonomous trucking company. They run middle mile. They don't try to do everything. They're doing good middle mile runs between data warehouses and distribution centers. And they embraced our belief that you needed that tactile feel of the road. And so we have outfitted all of their vehicles with sightline tires, which are tires that have increased sensing capability. And together, working with them, we can find out from them, well, what data is valuable to you? When do you need to get it? How often do you need to get it? And it helps us refine the product, and it helps them deliver a better product for their company as well. So that's when any investment we make, we are always looking for, we know what we want to learn. Now, what can we give to this company that's going to help them get what they need to get? The financial pieces are actually the easiest pieces because everybody knows you want to be successful financially. But what are the intangible? What are the things where we have something of value that we can give to this company to help them achieve their goals because they're giving us some intangibles that are going to help us achieve our goals? And Chris, now, when it comes to the sustainable materials, that's become the main focus right now this year. The mobility marketplace has slowed down a little bit. We've also made 17, 18 investments in those areas. So we've learned a number, not by any stretch all of the things we want to learn, but we've learned a number of things and we've been able to apply those. And it's become clear to us that the material space is the next big space we have to conquer. The materials that go into tires, and there's a lot of materials that go into tires, historically have not been the friendliest materials, environmentally friendly materials. So we are looking at ways to replace things like petroleum oils with soy oils. These are things we already do today. Rice husk ash silica, which is a byproduct, a waste product of the rice industry. It's almost 90% silica, that ash. And so that's a cradle to cradle story. And that's got us thinking that as we look at other ways of replacing new materials, getting new materials into the tire, things like recycled PET bottles that can become polyester cords, the market needs a little stimulus. There are companies that want to do these kinds of things, but they aren't far enough along yet for a company as large as Goodyear to be able to get the supplies we would need in the volume we would need to make hundreds of millions of tires a year out of it. So the idea is that ventures can seed that development work with companies that our researchers think are doing very interesting things. And no, just like any venture investment, not all of them are going to pay off. But the ones that do pay off then have taught our folks things they need to know, have gotten us to know companies that are growing and producing things that we can put into the tires, and we can continue to work with them to help them grow, to help them scale, to help them find JV partners to get volumes that we can use, and hopefully get much more sustainable materials into the tire. We have a target of, we've produced a 70% sustainable material tire. We've done a demo one of 90, and we're trying to get to 100% sustainable material tire by 2035. So quite a bit of work still needs to be done, and Ventures is looking for ways we can help accelerate that growth.
Got it. But if you see me looking down, I'm just checking texts from people. They're trying to prioritize these and throw them in. There's a couple of questions about stage, like, what stage you guys like to invest in?
So we are stage agnostic. We have done everything from a $250,000 seed round, unpriced round, a safe, up to a $3 million reinvestment. Most of the investments we did in the past were in the $1 to $2 million range, and most of those were A, B, and a couple of C's and one D round. Going forward, we're looking to move earlier, so we'll expect to see more seed A and B and less of the C and D rounds. We don't have a rule that we won't do it, but especially in materials, by the time a company got to the point where it was a D round or an E round of funding, the size of check that I would be putting in is not going to have any material impact on shaping the direction that company goes. And the kind of money they need to continue to grow is just beyond my capabilities.
Right. Chris, there are two questions around engagement. The first question, it looks like it's more about kind of internal engagement. Like, how do you how does Ventures going to interact with the business units across Goodyear Tire and Rubber? And is there a lot of kind of coordination and piloting and testing? And like, so that's the first question, is like around just like how you work with the rest of Goodyear.
Yes. So with a number of the investments we made, we didn't have to have any buy-in or approval from any part of the business because this was all new stuff that everybody just needed to know about. But we do try with every investment, because of the learning agenda we have, to get a pilot or a proof of concept either with a business unit or with a group in R&D, so that we can have that mechanism to learn what it is we want to learn. Materials is a little bit different because materials are things that are going to go directly into the product. There we've added in a step of the process. So now, before taking an investment opportunity to our investment committee, we vet it with the materials leadership and make sure that they agree with us that this is a company that's pursuing something that's of high interest to them. So we get the materials leadership's buy-in before we will take it to the investment committee. But then when we take it to the investment committee, we already have the materials people saying, yeah, we think this is important.
Got it. And the second question around engagement is actually around engagement of startups. So the question is, what they're really looking for is whether you guys do pilots and POCs and kind of design partnerships with startups, or are you purely financial investors and you don't really get involved in kind of testing kind of solutions internally?
We're very much hands-on. We look for, I do make sure we don't lead on deals. We may lead on some deals in the materials space, but we decided we didn't want to lead on deals. The financial aspects are critically important to us, but we wanted to be a follow-on investor with a financial lead who their focus was on making sure that terms of the deal were financially sound, that those pieces and parts were together. And then we could focus more on the strategic aspects and the piloting and the proof of concept, and also know that we weren't going to inadvertently push a company in a direction that they shouldn't go. Because when you're a small company and you have a large company come in and invest in you, not every large company behaves well in that situation. They think, well, I gave you money, you need to give me what I want. We look at it and say, no, we're investors in you. We want you to be successful. Part of the reason we're not leading is because that's a check and balance on our needs. When we say we want to do X, if the financial lead says, hey, that's a little early for them, we'll back off.
So Chris, following up on Scott's question, what boxes does a startup need to check before you actually say this is viable enough for me to look at?
So we will look at, there are certain types of materials that are of higher interest than other materials. So if the material is high on the materials leadership agenda, if they say, this is my big pain point, this is an important problem for me to solve, then I am going to look more closely at companies that are solving that problem or solving something close to that problem. I will often then take a company, because I am not a materials, that's not my background at all. I'm not a materials scientist. It does not take long for what the startup folks are saying to go right over my head. So I want to take them to somebody who will understand what they're saying and have them nod their head and say, yeah, I believe this. I am beginning to understand certain kinds of technologies that had looked to be promising, but have proven to be dead ends. And so those I will sort of push to the side and say, no, I don't want to pursue that. But it's very much a conversation, a dialogue with our materials team to understand what their priorities are and to then look for companies that can grow into that space. Because if they're already solving that problem, and we know that they're solving that problem, there's not really anything for me to do. If there's a gap, if there's a technology that's promising but unproven, then there's something I can do. And then we can also use that post-investment period to say, well, here's what's not proven. Can we shape a way to work together to prove this?
I got a bunch of like rapid fire questions for you that are coming in. Do you mind if I fire these off at you?
Go for
We got like 10 minutes to the top of the hour, so I figured why not? We'll do a rapid fire group. Okay. The first is that when you mentioned faces, the first one was fleets. There's just a question like, what does fleets mean for you guys?
Okay, I'm glad that question came up because I didn't give it enough coverage before. So today, when you are driving your car, you've probably, you have to buy the tires from a dealer who's bought the tires from some company, and it's a one-off purchase. It's a one-time thing. But there are lots of vehicles that are operated as fleets, and the purchases for them are made by fleet managers. So trucking companies, for example, taxi companies. And tires can be one of the top 3 expenses these companies have. When we look at the changing dynamics of mobility today, we see that consumers are increasingly going to wind up in fleet vehicles rather than personally owned vehicles. And the models for how we sell our product to consumers might start to look more like how we sell to commercial operations. And so we are looking at companies that are doing those kind of fleet management things and providing services to consumer fleets as a way of understanding how our business might change. And there are a number of ways that this can happen because as I mentioned, with fleets, tires are extremely high purchase for them. It's a pain point. And with some fleets, we can sell them miles instead of tires. And with aircraft, we often sell them landings instead of tires. So will we also then be able to sell similarly to consumers? If the vehicle comes with a tire that lasts as long as the vehicle, well, I don't have to sell that tire. I can sell them miles for that tire.
Right.
That's kind of interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
The next question is asked basically, is Goodyear doing, have you done any work in Israel? Have you made any investments in Israel, or have you worked with any partners like Drive TLV or someone else in Israel?
Yes, we partner with Drive TLV. We've made 3 investments in Israel so far. We've invested in AutoFleet, which is fleet optimization, so indoor fleet play. Tactile Mobility, which is about capturing data around the tire. Yeah. And we've invested in Core Actions. And Core Actions is inside the vehicle, but monitoring the driver's behavior and whether or not they have the capacity to operate the vehicle safely. Safety is a huge thing for us, and so we thought Core Actions made sense for us as well. We like what we have seen in the Israeli ecosystem, very impressive companies, and Drive TLV has been a great partner for us in helping us identify, meet, and source those deals.
Cool. There's a question here about whether kind of smart or green infrastructure is an area of interest for Goodyear.
Not for a direct investment. We are paying attention to it, but our Beyond Tires is really still kind of close to the tires. So yes, the infrastructure is important, but we are not seeing anything happening in infrastructure where, wow, we really need to get deep into this and learn more about this because it's going to impact the services or the products that we offer. So it's more of an area that we monitor and pay attention to rather than an area of direct investment for us.
Got it. There's a question here about kind of what connected means for Goodyear, and if it's just about kind of, connected tires, so to speak, or if there are other things that you think about in terms of, connected when you talk about that term.
Yeah, we think beyond tires when it comes to connected, but the investments, so AutoFleet would be an example there. AutoFleet is a fleet management company, and their vehicles are all connected, and they're making decisions about where those vehicles go and when and how. And so we need to understand that so that we can better service those customers. But the tire itself is also becoming more connected, and that creates new opportunities for us as well. So we made some early investments in general connectivity of vehicles and learn where and how tires can play a role in fitting more data, useful data into that. And now we're more focused on those pieces.
Got it. This is a long question, but if I can shorten it, I think they're basically asking if regenerative energy or power is a focus area.
We have looked at that in a number of opportunities that came up early. We did not make any investments in that area. I think we still pay attention to it, but we haven't seen anything happening in that space where, wow, we really need to learn more about this because it's going to impact the product or it's going to impact the services that Goodyear is going to offer in the future.
Got it. David, do you mind if I keep firing off questions?
Go ahead. We have audience questions. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, totally. Here's a question around whether you guys have a point of view on mobility as a service. Like, I think that meaning like the shift in ownership that's happening. If you guys have a point of view or made investments in that area.
Yeah, that plays into the consumer fleet piece, the idea of mobility as a service. We even we look at tires as a service in certain markets as well. So as more and more of the mobility options that are available to people are available as services rather than products that they purchase, we have to figure out what business models we need to pursue that will fit that and help us have a sound foundation in those models.
Cool. All right. I think we got time for a couple more questions, so I'm going to try to squeeze these in. This is also kind of a long question, but I think that what they're asking is that a lot of the stuff that you've described, this person is kind of saying they seem like Horizon 1 type stuff, kind of connected to the core business. And they're asking if you've thought about or have done anything in kind of the Horizon 3 transformational kind of big bet area.
So I think if you look through the portfolio, yes, when it comes to materials, we are looking Horizon 1, Horizon 2, kind of close to the bone. When it came to the investments we made in AV and EV technologies, we made those over the last couple of years. They were fairly reasonably early bets. They were not things that were businesses Goodyear would be in, but they would change the mix of businesses that we could offer, the mix of services, or even impact the product. But no, as an investor, I'm not looking to invest in something that could be a complete greenfield opportunity for Goodyear. It's really more that learning agenda. What do we need to know that's going to impact our business and change it, not create a new one. It's not that we're opposed to creating new ones, but there are other folks, other teams within Goodyear who are focused on that. We have an innovation lab in San Francisco who they come up with new service ideas, they incubate those inside the company, they get customers, and they grow them and launch them as standalone businesses. So ventures is one tool, but it's not the only tool that we use.
So I'm combining 2 or 3 different questions here, but there's kind of curiosity in terms of like, what's the most kind of interesting thing you've seen, the most interesting startup, the most interesting technology, or the thing that you're kind of most excited about, maybe as you look out to the next 18 months or so?
Wow. That's not a softball question, unfortunately. Over the last couple of months, I've shifted my focus 100% materials. So with those materials glasses on, getting to a 100% sustainable material tire, I think is critically important. Tires are a wear part. So material comes off of the tire when it's being used. And there are certain materials that go into a tire today that are very hard to recover or recycle. Carbon black, for example. Carbon black will make up between 16 and 22% of a tire. It gives it structural integrity. Yes, it's also why it looks black, but it's the structural integrity in the different components that's important. When you vulcanize a tire and apply that heat, you mix all these things together, and you've created these polymers that when you then try to break them apart, you break down their structure and you break down the benefits they had when you put them together in the first place. We haven't figured out how to put Humpty Dumpty back together yet. I mentioned we're using some different kinds of oils to replace certain things. The rice husk has silica, the PET bottles, but carbon black is a huge barrier for us in terms of finding a way to recover that material from end-of-life tires and get it back into tires. That would be my nirvana, though. Nirvana for me is take a tire that's end of life and be able to break it down and put those materials back into the tire.
Right. That would be nirvana. So, look, this has been amazing. I've got a few people who've asked if they can send you pitches. Like, is it okay if people send us stuff? Can we throw them over the wall to you, Chris?
Yes, please.
Awesome. So, folks, if you're listening, if you've got stuff that's matches the stuff that Chris is talking about, send it over, and we'll make sure it gets into Chris's hands. David, sorry I kind of dominated this whole.
Yeah, it's fine. I guess I just have one more question to throw at Chris. If you could share, you kind of said that your investing hypothesis is based on what you want to learn. Do you have kind of a list or an idea of what it is you want to learn that you could share it so people know what to pitch you, which areas should approach you?
So if you look at the areas where we have, if you look at the Goodyear Ventures website and see the companies we've invested in today, our thesis on autonomy has evolved as most people's has. ADAS is an area that we think is going to see explosive growth over the next decade. And the same thesis that we have with autonomy would apply to ADAS. ADAS systems today don't work as well as they should. And partly that's because, at least our thesis is because they're not taking the data directly from the road and factoring that in. They're still too vision based. So ADAS is an area that we are still strongly and heavily interested in. The material space, obviously, if you understand the components of a tire and you know which materials have not yet been replaced with more sustainable materials, anything in that field is right for us. Beyond that, I don't know that there's much more. Of course, I'll be proven wrong tomorrow because something will come in over the transom, but I don't know that there's much more in the EV space that we have not already explored and learned. But I'm always open to being told I'm wrong.
This has been great. All right, well, I got to call it. But Chris, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was interesting.
Yeah, everyone, you've been listening to Chris Varley. He's a principal at Goodyear Ventures, of course, the corporate venture capital arm of Goodyear Tire and Rubber. Our next call is going to be with Eric Threlkill. He's a former senior vice president and CIO of several major healthcare systems here in the U.S., including the $8 billion Envision Healthcare. Eric's got a ton of insights on for basic insights for Israeli digital health companies that want to enter the U.S. market. So we're talking to him April 2nd. Hope you can join us. Again, I'm Scott Cohen from AGP Ventures on behalf of myself and David Yahid in Israel. Thanks to Chris and thanks to our co-hosts EcoMotion and Arkin Holdings. And thanks for all for joining us. Until next time.
Chris. Bye.